Okay, so I'm TJ Monserrat and we will be discussing HTML performant patterns. For this video, the objectives are to determine when to use different HTML patterns and WebJS functions as well as CSS to meet uh, the requirements of developing that website, and what practices to use to deliver your content in the most efficient way, making a better user experience in essence. Now, let's just see this part of the video where, in terms of the time to interactive, it really is very frustrating for the user, even if the um, system is showing the screen. And if you are trying to click on it, if you are waiting for it to be interactive, that is really a bad experience. So for this one, we will be, if you don't want to have that kind of setup, especially uh, for the websites that you will be creating on later on in your life, we'll discuss first the very basics. So first is the HTML structure. Usually we start with this one. You have your hello world title and the body. But when developing a website, it becomes more complicated than this. And the very basic essentials would be usually put in here. You have your, let's get my pointer. You have your doc type HTML to determine that this is a HTML document, HTML5 document. What are the languages being used? So that your browser can understand that this is an English-based website. Um, what is the character set, which is UTF-8, and your meta viewport, which is used to determine um, if what size of the screen is being used. The thing is, um, your browser uses this to determine if your screen is of mobile version and desktop. So this will also be necessary if you have query languages um, for your CSS, media query for your CSS to determine if it's a small screen or big screen. Um, Another thing that you want to put is there's the initial scale and maximum scale with user scalable, yes, because of better uh, better user experience for those who have eyes that are not at their great shape in essence. So they can scale your website even on mobile phone by pinch zoom method. Then you have your title and the description, which is used for search engines. Um, Now there's the style here. We will discuss this one, the styles on the above fold, and then your body is in here. Then there are two ways to load your additional styles, which is um, this one using the no script and using the script version. And we will discuss why we have to put that. And then later on, your JavaScript is put at the end. Now, HTML patterns. Usually, people will say this is enough. You can use divs and spans, but on my end, that is not a good way of developing your website because one, it becomes inaccessible, or in essence, it becomes less understandable for computers. They don't know semantically what this means and what this means. What the div means or what the span means. So it is bad practice, in my opinion, to use only div and spans. You can use div for grouping, especially for grouping components, and adding styles. But other than that, there are better ways of using HTML elements. So One of them is h1. So if you want to put header or determine that this is a header, uh, you can use h1. You can also add styling purposes. So if you want to have a smaller font or have a different margin, but as long as you are determining that this is a header, you use h1, and you also have to say if it is a subheader of that main header, then use h2, h3, h4, h5, and h6, down to h6. And then you have your paragraphs. So if you have a block of text, it's better to use paragraphs to determine that this is a paragraph. You can use EM for emphasis and strong for stronger emphasis. The thing is, even if based on styles, you can change EM and strong. But if you want a computer to read that this is for emphasis purposes or for stronger emphasis, especially for those for computers that is being used for visually impaired people, and they use the computer audio or the system for reading the text. This will be useful for them for accessibility purposes. And then use a anchor tag with href for linking documents. And the thing is, a tags should be used only even if it looks like a button. Please don't use a button for um, areas where you are going to link it to a different page. So use an a tag for that. Then there is the article tag for articles. Section, if you want to section, do a section for the HTML. Then you have your header for the header of the whole page, as well as the header of a section or an article, and a footer if you want to have a footer of the whole page or a footer of a section on an art or an article. Then you also have a main with the role main to tell that this is the main content of the page. Now, there is also a picture tag, which in essence is like the audio and the video tag if you are going to go there as well. But the picture tag allows you to load different images depending on the size of the screen. So this will be the default set, which is the IMG, um, SRC. I think this should be SRC. And then um, the sources above is if the media if the screen size is greater than 1200 px, then it should load a larger size of uh, JPEG, the landing large version of the picture. And if it's between 600 to 1200 in essence, then you use a medium-sized JPEG. So in essence, you are loading the correct picture for the screen size. You don't need to load a really large version of the image if you are looking at a phone. So it in sort of making it faster. Now there are buttons as well for interactivity. So button here without being in the form is just a typical button where you can add event listeners for the click function. While in the form, if it doesn't have a type button, then um, the form is the form is automatically submitted. So you can add an event listener on the form instead of the button here to listen for the submit event. Now you also have input where you can have it required, or you also have the label for that input. Now, We'll go next to CSS loading patterns. We'll not sort of deep dive on the HTML patterns because that I'll put in on our classroom on the document, also on the description below, the document that I based this from. Now, for the CSS loading patterns, we'll discuss first how a browser loads um, loads a website. So, um, for this, you have your request page. If the browser has requested the page, it will get the HTML. So, once you see render blocking, that means the browser doesn't render any content. Now, for getting the HTML, there's the response. It will get first actually the head part of the HTML and then the body. So what this is being discussed here is if you put everything in the body, or both in the head and the body. So it starts building the DOM. Now, if it sees a style, or a link rel tag, it will get the CSS. If link rel tag that gets the style, it will render and or get the CSS, but it blocks the rendering again of the HTML. So it will get the CSS response, build CSOM, which is the CSS design, and then renders the design. Now, if you put also the JavaScript on the top, it will block the um, building of the DOM for rendering the content and get the JS response, run the JS, continue the DOM, and render the page. So this is sort of a bad way of loading the page. So one way is determining on your design if it is above the fold or below the fold. What means by above the fold is if you first load your website, whatever is the first thing that you see on your website is above the fold, and if you scroll down, that is below the fold. So for a best practice, you don't want to load your CSS from a separate sheet. You want to put it inside the styles here. So above the fold, use internal style. So that if if you request the page, get the HTML response, start building the DOM, because it has read the style from the head, it will automatically build the CSOM already, and then continue to DOM and render the page. So at least you are already um, putting in the content for your users. The next is you put all the other styles that you would need for the whole page by loading it via JavaScript. The reason for this is that um, once everything has been put, this script, once everything has been rendered on your DOM, which the user can see, this script will run to load the next uh, next set of styles. And then as a so that the thing is, this will, after the page has rendered, the JS has been run, and it will rebuild the CSOM, which will not um, affect your rendering, because it has already rendered. There is this part where is the no script, just in case your users have JS off. So it will load the style sheet if the user has turned off their JavaScript. Now, for JavaScript loading patterns, um, have your HTML script at the end of the body, at the most essential script, and the most essential script be part of the HTML. So the idea here is best case scenario, you have your JavaScript here that makes your um, website interactive once the HTML has been loaded. But if it cannot be done, you can have a script here with a sync or deferred attribute that will load the script after your HTML has been um, rendered. So again, we don't want to block the rendering of our content. So we want to again put the running of JavaScript at the end of the render page. Additionally, um, load additional scripts on the fly when new data or pages come in or if an interaction comes in. So you want to use code splitting bundlers like Webpack or Rollup to automate code splitting. So the idea here is, let's say for this is in your within that script, uh, you want to let's say if a user has clicked submit, then it will import a different script in essence, using the import function, so that it will not load that library um, on your uh, on your page, even if it's not being used. So that is that is something that you need to make sure that it is loaded later on. The other thing is, if you are going to load JavaScript, um, make sure that your JavaScript, you don't put extraneous code, even if it will be needed later on. If it's going to be needed later on, you should put it separately on a different live file, so that that file will be loaded later on. The thing is, if you have, let's say, a 350 kilobytes JavaScript that is uncompressed, you might have to wait 15 seconds before it can be interactive. So you usually, in my opinion, you have to have 100 KB to 250 KB of a minified version gzip. um, um, Gzip meaning it's also compressed on the server side. Minified, that means um, it becomes unreadable by a human, but you can still sort of go through with it. But that means it has removed all the spaces or changed the names to like single letters, just so that it can be below a certain size. The reason for this is that, again, JavaScript is parsed and compiled in real time, and we don't want to have that parsing and compiling um, stop us from or being too long before it becomes interactive. So, as a rule of thumb, we go for having this kind of note where we only want to give what is needed by the user as fast as we can, and we have to keep in mind to keep our website small on first load. So that is this video's version of the HTML performant patterns.